Thank you very much. Again, for me, it's a big privilege to be moderator of people who really understand something which I don't understand at all. And I'm moving now for my friend and my partner, for life partner. We've been doing many things last 20 years together. And the first time, Nubara, I will ask you a question which I have zero knowledge. And but I want to go a little broader, maybe ask you three groups of questions. One is about, of course, everybody sending us questions to before this our event or during this event about the vaccine of Moderna, all about. But I see the broader issue about what the possible scenario, how you see the future of this in general biotech, and how you see the importance of this pandemic, creating the importance of the biotech development, and what it will be. You've been doing this 20 more years, 30 years, and you've been one of the pioneer of this, establishing this flagship pioneering, and you've been not only Moderna founder, but you've been founding 40 more companies, and in this field, you see will be changes happening in the industry and all how it will influence overall. And the third part of question I want to ask you to elaborate whatever is about this. We've been doing together is Armenia 2020, Armenia 2041, Aurora, FAST, Global Armenian Influential Network. How you see the network will become important on this? Can we elaborate having unique advantage to sitting now in this discussion between different part of the world and talking about something which is, again, relevant to all of us. At the same time, it's most of the panelists is Armenian by origin. And yes, we are citizens of the globe, but also we are part of the Armenian network. How you see this part? If I may go with three directions, the question, you would pick out which one you want first and which one second and third, but you have 10 minutes more to talk about it.
That's great. Well, look, thanks everybody for doing this. This really is both a privilege, a pleasure, and by its unprecedented nature, hopefully something that we can mobilize and use in the future, because for many years we have thought about what is the advantage of having a broad network of Armenians all around the world, and at times like this, among them should really be to attract both our own expertise and knowledge, but also those of our close friends and colleagues. David, thank you so much for joining in this. You're officially a friend of the Armenians by doing this, and we have these all over the world. Ruben, I'll start. I thought I'd start by just painting from my point of view as a scientist and an entrepreneur, kind of what I think is a defining feature of the moment. And I'm going to try to do something. If it doesn't work, tell me, but this is to share one screen. Is this visible on your screens? Can you guys see this
yes.
chart?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I put this up. Many of you are seeing these online. This is fairly current, to describe the world that Dr. Navarro described, which is that every single country has this chart of these cases that are going up like wildfire. This is meant to show the various doubling rates, ranging from once a week to once every 2 days, or even faster. Cases that are doubling every day. You see the US now 23 days into this with 100,000 cases. And I put this chart up to just make the point that this, in my view, is nothing short of a global biological war. And I use the words carefully. This is not biological in the sense of man-made, but this is very much an all-out biological war. By the way, in nature, there are many such confrontations. Species go extinct, and we just don't know anything about them. And basically, certain specialists in biological fields follow these and explain why certain things went out of existence. But in fact, this kind of biological war is with precedence, except it hasn't affected humanity quite in this visible way. And there's two reasons I mentioned this. This is not the scary part of it. I think we have to treat it as that. I think one of them is that this is kind of a war between a social animal. I never thought I'd use the word in a conversation, but we are social animals, and an invader that uses our social contact to transmit itself. So it's a particular, I would say, attack on our social being. If we were not social animals, if we were trees and we couldn't move around, this would not have a problem. And again, I think we have to realize that this is our vulnerability. This is where isolation is such a key and first point. But we're also social animals that carry with us an immune system, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because that has to be deployed in this global biological war. And above all, we also have, as a social animal, technologies. Our intelligence have given us massive amount of technologies to deploy. And while we're being clumsy about getting organized to do so, certainly with the World Health Organization's leadership and many countries following, we're getting better at it. And I think that the prospects of we're not going to lose our socialness in this particular war, but we will suffer casualties because of it. I just think it's important to put it in context. Let me mention a couple of just high-level things then with that said. Many of you know that my activities involve starting biotech companies that explore completely new ways of delivering therapeutics and many other technologies. One of them being this company called Moderna, and I'll just very quickly relate to you. I'm not going to get into the science very much, but Moderna has over the last 9 years developed a whole new platform of medicine based on messenger RNA. Messenger RNA is the molecule that exists between DNA and proteins that carries the message, the information from what is our inherited repertoire of genetic potential to whatever protein the body needs to make. And of course, some of those proteins are what the immune system needs to be able to wage this battle, and then mRNA can also be used there. What's important to know is that this technology, even while it's being developed for the last 9 years, has no approved drugs or vaccines that have come from it, but it has over 20 different drugs and vaccines that have been tested in humans. They've been tested in over 2,000 humans across many different disease states, and importantly, 7 of those being vaccines. Now, in the vaccine world, you have to show the effectiveness of the vaccine in a prophylactic setting to prevent the disease, but you also, above all, have to show safety. And we are gaining more and more demonstrations of safety, even while some of the vaccines we've worked on are continuing to go up the learning curve in terms of demonstrating efficacy. We had been working on coronavirus vaccines with the NIH for the last 2 years. We've developed a candidate vaccine for MERS, which has been tested in animals and was getting close to being tested in humans when this pandemic broke out. And at a very early stage, thanks to the close relationship we've had with the NIH, with particularly the NIAID, the infectious disease part, Moderna was asked very rapidly to try to come up with a particular molecule of mRNA that would represent the most vulnerable part, it's believed, of the virus in its ability to infect cells, but also the most distinctive part to be able to use as an antigen for a vaccine. And due to the nature of the technology, we were able to very rapidly make this material, this chemistry in our facilities in Boston, near Boston, and provide it to the NIH. And that testing has begun, as many of you have heard, about 2 weeks ago. The first wave of testing, phase 1, will involve 45 healthy volunteers. There's 3 different dose groups. And as we now progress through each of the dose groups, we expect to have both safety information as well as, importantly, early information of an immune response, which, given the numbers of patients, will be not significant yet, but it will be indicative of going to the next stage, which we hope, upon positive early results, will start in the spring. There is then a phase 2, which will be trying to establish what the ultimate dose of such a vaccine will be, which will be larger. There may be multiple phase 2 trials carried out. We're planning those right now because we really do need to do science, even while we're doing clinical testing, because as Dr. Navarro said, we don't really know a lot about this virus, and there are many different contexts in which we need to think about the vaccine. So there's different ways to test. So we'll do that in a phase 2. And on the ideal situation, a really ideal situation, which we can't rule out, but we can't count on, we're hopeful that come late summer, early fall, we'll be in a position to do a much bigger phase 3 trial, which will really be the pivotal way to demonstrate the vaccine's potential efficacy. Now, in the meantime, there's a lot of investments that needed to be made, and we've begun to make them as well through collaborations with various agencies, particularly the US government, which is stepping in order to produce very large quantities. You cannot go overnight in such a new technology from having thousands of samples, if you will, for testing to hundreds of millions. But the technology that we're using, we believe, will be quite robust and quite scalable. And so we're beginning to manufacture, we're beginning to stockpile, and we think that over the summer we'll be able to at least have material sufficient, should the need arise, to be able to deploy some of these vaccines for frontline healthcare workers, which under emergency situations may in fact be life-saving. And we will at least be in a position to try that. It's very, very difficult when one enters this to avoid giving hope when everybody wants hope. And so we're very, very careful to say that, we believe that if what we're doing works, and if what everybody else is doing to do vaccines works, we still will not make enough vaccine to supply the world. So this is absolutely not a competition between different companies and different approaches. This is basically a competition between us and the virus. So it's human technology counteracting the human social tendencies we have that makes us vulnerable against a virus that abuses it. Basically, what's where the situation is. Let me just say a couple of other things, and I'm happy if there are questions to go into that again. But more broadly, vaccines are only one approach that are being tried. What is really amazing to see is in the modern state of biotechnology, just how many different ways in which different companies, just within my own sphere, flagship sphere, are going after it. We are using, across multiple approaches, artificial intelligence to virtually screen compounds, which you can do now computationally, against various of the data sets that we have about this vaccine and about its infectivity. So there are compounds being kind of identified by analogy to other compounds that are being tested. We have the ability to computationally design antibodies that can go after particular spots in proteins. Never had that before. It's being deployed. There's a company called Generate Biomedicines, whose lead scientist is also an Armenian, Georg Grigoryan. He's working on literally producing hundreds of very specific tailor-made antibodies using computation, and within a couple of weeks producing these. My colleague Avak Kahvejan also is leading a very significant project in drug discovery. And then finally, I'll say, and one interesting thing is that even technologies as remote as the ability to collect blood, which many of us have heard about, this is something that we'd like to be able to do at home. There's technologies now that have not been deployed yet, but now hopefully will be for this pandemic, where literally you can have a device sent to you by mail. Basically, you attach it to your arm. You don't really have a sensation. It draws 100 microliters of blood safely, which you then put into an envelope and send back. And this is, to our knowledge, the only FDA-approved device that can do this. It's a company called 7sense, and they were not at all working on this. They were working on hemoglobin testing and many other things. And suddenly they stopped everything. The whole company pivoted to try to enable this, because as Dr. Navarro said, one of the biggest things we're going to have to do is to test for seropositivity. That is, in millions of people, we're going to need to test relatively soon whether they've already had the virus, whether they've generated an immune response. And the way to do that will be through blood testing. And you need access to people. You can't bring people to health clinics to have them sampled. And so remote sampling of those people and the ability to test. So these are all things that are part of the technology kind of weaponry and logistics that are being developed. So let me just say, let me stop on that and say a couple of other things that I see going forward based on what Ruben, you asked. First, I think that as Lord Darcy mentioned, this is a significant challenge to the healthcare system that we have. and I think that they are acting in heroic ways, but this shouldn't be the way we come out of this crisis and just keep doing what we're doing. One of the things that we've begun to think about is to what extent public health, which has been highly neglected over the years as part of a strong healthcare system, where only a few % of the annual healthcare spend goes into any form of prevention or early detection. How can we convert what looks like a sick care system today to an actual healthcare system? How can we challenge our colleague, the health minister of Armenia, to think of what their job is as health defense, not just health care? That is, how can everybody's health be, how can we think about early detection, deterrence, delay, prevention, the way our military thinks about such issues instead of simply waging battle when a disease takes hold. Because indeed, when a disease takes hold, it could already be too late, and that's what we're observing. So that's one of the areas that we're trying to anticipate because it's going to be an inevitable consequence. And then the last thing I'll say is the following. I'm standing, I have in my background Mount Ararat, which for the Armenians on this call is obviously symbolic of a lot of things, but among them, for our projects together with Ruben and many others, is really a symbol of survival. If in fact, biblically, this is a story of a second chance for humanity. And I don't want to make this overly dramatic, but we've talked about this for many, many years, independent of a pandemic. Humans are often given second chances. And the question is, what do you do with that second chance? And as Armenians all around the world, we are the product of a second chance. And we have gone through our own journeys of going through the stages of surviving, then reviving, and then hopefully thriving. And we're doing that all around the world. But that journey is familiar to us. And I think that's a journey that unfortunately most, if not all of humanity is now being forced to go through. So I would say the survival instincts that we all have will be essential to make this battle possible. The optimism, the kind of cautious optimism that we need to have, not to give up, all of those things are familiar to many of us who in our own family stories have had to go through a struggle. But then the question is, what does reviving look like? In other words, what does recovery look like? We're not, anybody who thinks that this is just a bad nightmare and as soon as we wake up, we'll go back to the same thing, I'm afraid is going to be very disappointed. I think that the normal that we used to experience will be quite different going forward, just like after a civil war, just like after any massive prolonged disruption in societies. And the question we have to say is, what constitutes reviving? How do we go back to work? What triggers that? How do we rely on each other? What does trust in government mean? What does trust in large corporations mean? All of these things, which Andre may want to touch on, are on the table, and we're having many, many discussions across many different fora about this topic. So surviving, going to revival, and then eventually thriving, and thriving in a way that hopefully can prevent these situations. And I say that with the background of Ararat simply to say that I think Armenians should basically keep that symbolism in mind, and everybody is going to wage this battle. This is not unique to us, but at least within our community, we have experience to draw on, we have resilience, and we should use it. Thanks a lot.